Hello gamers, welcome back to Game Warp. I'm Kim, and joined with me as always is my co-host, Elwood Jones. How's it going?
It's going well. Obviously at the moment we're in the middle of our featured game of the month, which is Firewatch, so I'm torn between having this wonderful game where I get lost and the sudden desire to go off and join the forestry service, so it's a weird time of to be in, but no, I'm really happy to obviously be discovering Firewatch finally after everyone's raved at us for so long to obviously play it. As always, if anyone does have any suggestions or what they would like to see us play, please do let us know. We have got the Facebook, which should be on the screen there right now. We also have the Instagram and Twitter, so whatever your preferred means of interacting with us socially you can hit us on all platforms. We also have the results back of our Instagram challenge, as myself and Kim held a little social experiment where I said that basically Kim could put any picture of herself onto Instagram holding something game related and it would get more hits than myself, and I would probably be called a chud or something like that because the internet is so kind like that. The results are obviously in, and of course Kim completely walked it, so congratulations to Kim, and I'm kind of relieved that no one did in fact call me a chud, so it was a positive experience all round.
Win-win experience. At this point, our review of Firewatch should already be up, so be sure to check that out. The link should be in the description below. So let's get right on with the show. Joining with us today is a solo independent game developer. Our company is called Slumber, and he had released a game earlier this year, which is an adventure RPG called Aerolite Core, and is currently working on his second game, Astral Traveler, which will be released later this month. Before we continue, let us welcome Kevin Giguere to the show. Hi, Kevin. How's it going?
Hi. It's going well, and you did a great job pronouncing my name, so congratulations. I definitely heard the French accent in that one.
Well, I'm only 3 hours away from you, so I should hopefully not butcher it. So let's start with your background. How did you get into game development?
All right, so I'm 35 years old at this point. I just had my birthday last week, actually. And I guess a decade and a half ago, I went to college to learn programming. Through time, I worked mostly on websites, but I did work for a video game company. We did Flash games. Back when Flash was a thing. We did a lot of promotional stuff for companies like Disney, Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers, a lot of to promote movies or comic books, cartoons, that sort of stuff. And over time, I decided that I just, I had to kind of set that aside and work for another web company. But I still had the passion for making games, and I kind of wanted to do it myself, that is to have that creative freedom. So I decided to found Slumber in 2012 to work on Aerolite Core, and I've been at it ever since.
I mean, I first just have to say it's really surprising the fact that you're a solo developer, and as we constantly find, because when we look at independent gaming, I think when we talk about independent gaming, your instant, unless you're familiar obviously with the scene, your instant thought when you think independent gaming is to think back to like those Showa games that used to get on cover discs and something very simplistic. And then we have games like Super Meat Boy, Fez, and obviously yourself with producing Astral Traveler. I mean, looking at Astral Traveler, it's an absolutely stunning game, I'm going to say right off the bat, and brought back to myself. I've went back and forth, and I mean, this is Kim's influence again. I got flashes of Thumper, and for myself as a retro gamer, I also got like hints of Wipeout there, just looking at obviously at the trailer there. But from obviously the press briefing we've got from the game, it's not a racing game as such. It's I mean, how would you describe the game?
Yeah, so I like to call it a runner racer in a way, because you're not racing against other vehicles, you're not racing against other cars, but you're rather racing against the track itself. It's not a procedurally generated game, so there are 47 tracks that have been crafted specifically for the game. And obviously, as you move forward, it becomes increasingly difficult. But it's also not a simplistic racing game. So there's a lot of platforming. Your ship has the ability to jump, so there is actual platforming. There's a timing mechanic where there are orbs scattered around the levels, which as you approach them, if you press a phase button, you can kind of move through them, which will allow you to get a burst of speed. You can shoot down the enemies. So there's just... It's this interesting meld of it's very chaotic, where it sends a lot of stuff at you, and you kind of have to react to everything while keeping a very fast speed and just aiming to mark high on the leaderboards, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think when you were describing that, it's exactly what I saw. It's this idea that you're essentially running down this path and you're trying to avoid everything. So very much like Mirror's Edge in the fact that you're constantly going forward, and it's your sort of job to avoid everything that's sort of coming to you. And I know this is a really weird comparison, but it's sort of like whenever you like drive on the motorway and you look at the embankment and you see that rail and you think, how great would it be to like run across that rail and do like jumps and that. And I saw that. Sort of, that was the image it sort of brought to me in the game, and obviously the game is very sci-fi sort of based, so it's a lot more flashy and there's a lot more things happening on the screen. I mean, it looks absolutely insane just looking at it. I wouldn't think that this is a one-man team who's developed this game.
Well, actually, it is technically a two-man team. So I am working with a Turkish developer, actually, Borganel. And on this project, it is both of us basically working most of the aspects of it. We also hired a 3D artist for some of the aspects. The ship, the player's ship, for instance, and the enemies were created by that 3D artist. But overall, it is really both of us who have crafted this game. And even as down to the rest of the visuals, the setting, the models. It's been interesting too, because as you were saying, my first project came down mostly to me, Aerolite Core that is, and I didn't do the art on that one. I did subcontract all of the artwork and the music and all of that. Trust me, you don't want to see my artwork in the game. I don't think that would be good for anyone involved. But it was mostly a one-man project, because it was my project. There wasn't. I was receiving assets and I was kind of reviewing them, and everything kind of went through me. For this project, it really is a two-man project in the sense that we are really sharing the tasks, and he's taking care a lot of the engine. He's taking care right now. He's working on optimizing the game to make sure that it runs properly. So it's been a really, really interesting experience just to compare the two, and. I'm even sure that my next project is going to be even more different. So I guess when it comes to indies, there's no one size fits all. It's all about what is the project, what does the project require, what are the opportunities that we have, and moving forward from there, I would say.
What inspired you to make Astral Traveler? Is there any games or anything that inspired you in particular? Because I know that like Aerolite is very 16-bit. It's very inspired by, like it looks a lot like older JRPG style and all that sort of thing. Is there something that inspired Astral Traveler?
Sure. So Astral Traveler, when it started off, I was inspired by kind of mixing F-Zero with Tempest 2000. So Tempest 2000 is this old game where you kind of shoot in the distance and you're moving around a tube, which is something that we do a lot in Astral Traveler as well. And it's been interesting because as the game evolved and as we tried out different things to added new mechanics and whatnot, we found a lot of inspiration. We found Wipeout. We found another old game, actually, Skyroads, which has a lot of jumping involved as well. I mean, I think it's super important to just keep an eye out on various games, especially old games. I think a lot of people tend to kind of forget a lot of what the old games kind of did. and I love to draw upon old games, some of the old game philosophies, but not necessarily restricting myself to the limitations of what they did back then. Just kind of taking the best of that era and leaving the rest on the cutting room floor, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is again just the beauty of the independent scene, especially it being so blossoming now, especially with Steam really getting behind it. And now we've obviously got the likes of Microsoft and PlayStation both doing their own sort of inroads into the independent scene, as we've obviously seen with titles such as like Ori and the Blind Forest, and Seasons After Fall. We've seen these games that we perhaps wouldn't have seen in recent years, now obviously getting the same sort of respect that the AAA titles are starting to get. And I think it's just a really exciting time for gaming as a whole. But I mean, obviously looking at the game, I mean, the trailer alone just seems to see this sense of incredible speed. I mean, is this sort of like the later levels we're seeing, or does the game just sort of always run at 100 miles per hour? Because certainly when we look at those games, which obviously started off fast, like Extreme G for the N64, often the games that started fast, it was often hard for the player to be able to control, and they spent half the time grinding off the barriers. So, I mean, is it sort of like a gradual progression with the speed, or do you just sort of like throw it at the player straight off and throw down the gauntlet and go, look, here's a challenge, let's see you roll with it?
Oh no, it actually starts off really, really fast. I don't have an actual kilometers or miles per hour number, but it starts off super fast. But the huge advantage actually is that since you are racing the track itself, even though it starts fast, it's just that there are a lot fewer obstacles when you start off. There's going to be just some basic walls, and you're just rotating around the field and whatnot. But as you move forward, suddenly there's lava. Suddenly there's ice. Everyone loves ice in video games, after all. There's enemies trying to shoot you down, and it's just a mix of all of these elements. But you still got to go fast. So that's how we gauge the balancing throughout the experience.
Because it's a runner. I always think about runners being like one big map, and then it kind of like phases into each other. Does it do that, or is it just like one solid track, and then you finish that track and you try to like keep beating that time or something?
Yeah, it is one solid track. It is because we do have a lot of we have basically a lot of different levels. We have 47 levels, and they have different themes as well. One of the big things that I enjoy personally is I like to have a lot of variety. So I think a lot of indie games can't really necessarily afford a lot of variety because of budget or time and whatnot. But it was really something that I really wanted to integrate into this project as well. Even though there are different levels and there are kind of themes that can be seen, the more desert area and more forest, thematic groupings basically. You do have a feel for different sectors. They do feel kind of different, I think. So. Yeah, they don't connect, but there is some thematic grouping, and the loading of levels is pretty fast as well, and it's pretty dynamic. We added a nice kind of flowing feel to it, so it might not be connected, but it feels connected regardless.
Will the game have any sort of underlying sort of storyline, or is it just purely about creating this challenge for people to test themselves against?
Yeah, it's more about the challenge itself. There's no real underlying. I mean, there is a little bit of flavor text included, but I wouldn't say that the big draw is the story itself. I think it's really the challenge and the leaderboards. I really wanted people to get a chance to compete against other people and to make to make the maps revisitable, I guess, so you can go back and discover, try to optimize the path, try to find ways to increase your speed through those boost mechanics. So I really wanted to play with that replayability in that sense.
And would you say there's a particular audience that you're targeting with the game? I mean, is it going to be sort of like, are you really sort of creating a game for those people who sort of like aim to go out there and beat scores, or is it just sort of like, is it sort of like more of a game that you sort of pick up and play when you've got like that spare sort of hour or so?
Yeah, I think it's gonna appeal to people who like a challenge for sure. It's gonna appeal to racing fans, but at the same time, the level, like there are 47 levels, but the levels themselves aren't too long. Like some of them can take, for instance, about a minute. At that length, like you could have like 5 minutes in your day that, oh, I'm gonna try to beat some scores on Astral Traveler, and I think it kind of fits in within that that segment of the audience. But at the same time, you could also have someone who really tries to aim to perfect those scores and just spend hours on any given map, for instance. It's a little bit like Trackmania as well, where you have a quick restart button on the controller. So I don't like to have my time wasted. So in my games, I make sure to have a lot of time saves in that sense. So yeah, you just press a button and you're going back at full. You start at full speed. You don't have to accelerate. It's immediate and it's a pure rush. So I think that's about it. It's for people who are looking for that pure rush.
Okay.
I mean, we were talking before we came on the air tonight about gamer rage, and sometimes having the ability just to quick restart is sometimes what you need, because sometimes you paint yourself into a corner. And I like the idea that you obviously incorporated as one of your key features, that sort of quick reset, because I think it's something that a lot of games are sort of lacking really, and especially these sort of style games, it's sort of like, oh, I've got to go for all these different menus to get back just because I've screwed up this one thing which is not going to give me that perfect score. So I like the fact you including a quick reset in there is certainly a welcome feature, certainly for ourselves who get very, I don't know what the nicest way to put this, we get very upset easily if we hit that, if we find that minor flaw interrupting our perfect score.
Well, I think we're kind of different gamers in that sense, because I play a lot of games that actually fall right into the category of, say, Astral Traveler, because right when you were saying that, I thought right away to Geometry Dash. And why Geometry Dash is a big success for people is the fact that the moment you die, it has an auto restart. The fact that it auto restarts you kind of gets you compelled to keep going no matter how many times you die, and it really gets you into the game. And it's kind of like a short rush thing. You can stay there and grind for a long time if you really wanted to, or you can always revisit it. And I really like the concept of like the fact that it automates a lot of things for you, where you don't need to think and you don't really have the time to think.
Sure, absolutely, and I think it's one of the things that I'm kind of hoping the industry goes towards in general. Just let the people play the game. Like I feel like we kind of get lost sometimes in a lot of as you were saying, a lot of menus and a lot of things that impede being able to play the game or even replay the game. One of the big things that I had for my previous game, Aerolite Core, which is a Japanese RPG, I added a skip cutscene button, and it's still surprising how many games do not have a skip cutscene button, which I kind of don't understand. Like, yes, I'm super proud of this story, but at the same time, I want the player to get the experience that they want, and I kind of want to put those tools in the player's hand in order to accommodate them in that sense.
I think we've encountered a number of games which have missed out on that key thing. As you said, a skip cutscene button is occasionally a very handy thing to have, much like having an autosave function, or just generally a save function.
Save anywhere.
Which we've seen remarkably missing off games where they'll put a save function at the end of a level, but at the same time they design their levels so they're like an hour and a half. So if you have a mistake or you break something on your computer, the fact you then faced, oh, I'm going to go back and replay something I've seen before.
Yeah.
So sometimes it does stand as that these minor sort of, what people would consider to be minor features are often missing, and it's nice that people in the industry are realizing that it is nice and they are appreciated when programmers put these things in there. So
yeah. Well, faithful listeners and watcher viewers of our show will know what we're talking about, which game we're talking about that we just reviewed. as always, is if I can't play your game because there's too many bugs, then I can't give it a passing score. I'm sorry. Anyways, with that said, back to Astral Traveler. Are there any core features that you want to mention about the game? Like, so there's not a lot. There's like not a really. It's not very story driven, which is very opposite from your previous game, obviously. So this game is actually very contrast to the previous one. Like, it's a completely different path of what you're doing, and it seems like it's going to be a different experience.
It is literally, like, it is the polar opposite, basically. My previous game was in 2D, this one is in 3D. My previous game I did alone, this one I have a partner. My previous game was not a slow JRPG, but it was story driven, so it was more slowly paced. This one starts immediately at 100 and goes from there. So yeah, it is pretty different, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. Also, I don't want to pigeonhole myself in a single genre, in a single style. I like to explore. I like to play different things, and I think there's value in learning from different genres as well. Like, if you're making a first-person shooter, you shouldn't just play first-person shooters and learn from that. You can learn a lot from any other types of games. And I think you can learn a lot from making different types of games as well. So I'm sure that as I move, I haven't chosen what my next project is going to be. But I'm sure that as I move into my next project, I'm going to use a lot of what I've learned on this one and on the previous one, regardless of what genre it is. So it will probably be something entirely different, knowing myself.
So I'm curious is seeing as this one is more like a cooperation with someone else. Did the vision shift from how you originally envisioned it till like right now that it's nearing the final project and it's the product and it's going to be released soon?
Oh yeah, it definitely did. But I don't think it was necessarily like it wasn't a situation where we both had stuff that we wanted and we kind of decided to reject some. We didn't compromise. That's the word I was looking for. I don't think it was a matter of compromise. I think it's just a natural evolution of as we prototype, as we try different things in the game. This works. This doesn't work. This prevents us from accomplishing that goal of speed. Originally, we had this mechanic that lasted for a long time too, where the ship could change between red mode and blue mode, and both would kind of have different impacts on the environments. Both would have different abilities. And as we move forward, we realized, well, let's just blend it into one single thing, and the experience just became something else. In fact, if we got greenlit on Steam. We were amongst the last games which were greenlit back in March. And if you look at the trailer back then, it looks entirely different from what it is today. Actually, none of the visuals survived that version. We didn't have jump in that version. There's so many things that wasn't there, and that's just a natural progression as we play the game. Oh, there's something missing. It's not fun enough. It's not intense enough. But working with a teammate is great in that sense, because he's going to catch things that I'm not going to see, and I'm going to catch things that he's not going to see. So we are kind of different in the stuff that we relate to, and I think that just makes us stronger, because we kind of unify our strengths in that sense and compensate for each other's weaknesses.
This game, it was greenlit through Steam, and we've seen several interesting titles which coming out, especially at the tail end, because we obviously had like Kaiju Big Battel, Fight Tail Fantasy was one of the final titles as well. And it's only a shame that Steam have decided to go this way of no longer running that sort of process. So do you see any sort of change in the way the game industry is run? I mean, at the moment we've obviously got, before it used to be this sort of division between, you had the AAA titles, then you had independent titles. Now we're starting to see like the team that obviously that did Heavenly Sword have now come out with what they're calling the independent AAA titles to provide shorter game experiences. So do you feel that the sort of games that are coming out are sort of now being more sort of restricted in vision, or do you think it's now a more open playing field than it's ever been?
There's definitely a lot more games coming out now than ever before. I believe that since Steam Direct started, in the first 7 weeks, there were like 1,000 games that were released, which was a dramatic raise from the previous when it was on Greenlight. But also, I think people's because there are so many games that are being released, gamers' expectations are kind of going up. For a while, we had a nice era of having a few indies, a few high quality indies, and each of them kind of got to be featured. You had Fez, you had Braid, you had Super Meat Boy, all of those games. And as time went on, more and more indies appeared, and I guess the competition kind of grew, and a lot of games that were released during that era might struggle a little more now because expectations are higher. And I also think that the word indie is still a tough term to define. I'm on this game, a two-person team, basically. We really didn't spend a lot of money overall. But you take a game like The Witness, that's technically an indie game, but millions of dollars were spent on that. So you kind of had this wide range of resources, which are each getting called indies, and I think gamers are kind of expecting more out of their games kind of because of that. And at the same time, I don't think that AAA is changing all that much, because I think they're kind of doing their thing. They're kind of, AAA is kind of the conservative approach oftentimes. They're not going to change the formula dramatically. They'll tend to have one new mechanic in their games to kind of differentiate themselves, but they're very seldom are they going to have a dramatically different experience, something that the indie devs can do, but at the same time it's not like all just because it's entirely different doesn't mean it's going to succeed. And in fact, a lot of indie devs are sadly not really succeeding because of the environment we're in right now. Too many indies coming in, and we're not growing the audience of buyers either. It's a weird period, I would say, for that. And I kind of don't know where it's going to be next year and the year after. It feels kind of chaotic.
I think just for myself as both a gamer and someone who obviously watches what's coming out, I'm thankful for the independent scene, especially because when we look at AAA titles now, AAA titles are so focused on being these sprawling epics. I mean, when we look like Witcher 3, I think what's that, 60 hours of gameplay there. GTA 5, again, where there's another 60 to 80 hours of gameplay there. And if you're like someone like myself who gets a very limited amount of game time, it's sort of like you kind of like, I don't want to be stuck on this epic quest. I want something that I can pick up and put down. And I think that's what I love about the independent scene, is giving me those sort of games that I can pick up and put down. And I think it was only emphasized by the fact that when we look at this year's E3, and they ran Sonic Forces, the big AAA Sonic game, against Sonic Mania, and everyone was just more excited for Sonic Mania because it was finally giving us what we wanted. We just want something that we can pick up and we can put down. Something that's not going to take us like 40 hours to play. It's going to take 3 to 4 hours at the most if we do it in a straight sitting. And I think that's why I'm so glad that the independent scene is still there, and that people like yourself are obviously going out there and making these games that resonating, especially with the retro gamer myself who appreciates something a little shorter and doesn't always want a big epic to play. So I would hope that in these times that there is room for everyone, and that obviously the independent scene doesn't become too much like the mainstream scene, and that each can exist in its own little bubble so gamers can have variety. Because I think variety is always going to be what's going to keep things interesting. So.
Well, it feels definitely like the indie game scene has a little bit more. Well, right now definitely is the competition, and the lack of funds will also cause it to, not everybody is, Hellblade, who has like this team that build a great game and has a lot of money behind it and can do a lot of promotion. Say, give it to GameSpot to play for them. A lot of games get swept under the carpet. They kind of like get pushed away, and we play a lot of like incredibly indie games like that. I don't think a lot of people play, but there's also a perk to it, is that we see all these hidden gems that some other people haven't seen as well. And usually what indie games, like what I like about indie games, is the fact that take Sonic Mania for example. I haven't played it yet, but I've seen some gameplay of it, and what it does is it pays homage, like what you're trying to accomplish is, pays homage to, the best parts of the epicness of the retro game, and put in and use the mechanics and the updated techniques and stuff that we have now, and the technology to make it into something that meshes with modern. So it's a nice balance of two, and to find that balance is so important. And I think that that's what indie gamers do, is that they're inspired. They want to find something that the market doesn't have yet and bring it in, and that's what I love about the indie scene.
Sure. I will make one comment though. I feel like Sonic Mania, yes, it is. It's technically a fan game, but it's not really an indie game. It is sustained by Sega. It does have a lot of marketing dollars behind it, and I'm not saying that a game like that created by an indie with fewer marketing resources wouldn't necessarily succeed, but it would definitely, like, that game took years to make, and if you take multiple people years to make a game, you need to have a lot of sales at the bottom line to accommodate for that, and it is, with the amount of games coming out, and there are those games which bubble to the top and does gain that level of notoriety. When you look at how many games are actually getting released, you see how few and far between that actually is, which is a shame, because you're right. It is great to see all of that creativity and see those different experiences, and a lot of indies have great ideas. They kind of twist mechanics on their heads. It's absolutely brilliant, and few people get to see them because it kind of gets lost in a sea of other great indie titles, sadly.
I think it just sort of stresses the importance of going to your local indie game conventions, and I think I think gamers need to just get used to doing a little more legwork to find these hidden titles, rather than just listening to what the press say, obviously outside of ourselves. Listen to us, don't listen to everyone else. And just obviously get out there and venture out. I think gamers just need to start getting braver. As you said, there's too many titles that are getting lost in the mix just due to the sheer numbers. So I think it's always good the gamers obviously get out there and delve, do some crate digging for your games and try and discover something a bit different, which obviously through obviously doing this show, and we've seen time and time again, the independent scene is constantly proven to be a source of surprising. I would hope that even though there are more games that are being released to the scene, that it doesn't obviously deter people from still making these fantastic games. So
yeah, absolutely. And I would ask the gamers as well, like, when you find a game that you like, when you find a developer and an indie developer that you like, contact them, talk with them, leave a comment on Steam, for instance. If you can afford it and they have a Patreon, or you can buy a copy for a friend, for instance, like those make so much of the difference for the artists out there, for their bottom line, and it helps to produce more games, and oftentimes more polished games as well. As game developers produce more games, they will produce more polished products. So I think if you can support the indie game developers that you like, please do so.
So how about you plug your contact and where they can find you? Facebook, Twitter, Twitch.
Sure. So, oh yeah, I am on Twitch because I do I have done the entire development of Astral Traveler on Twitch, my part at least. So you can find me on Twitch at Slumber, all one word. On Twitter, it's Dragon_Slumber. And on Facebook, I believe it's Slumber Games. I think it's with an S. I should know my own Facebook, you'd think. Yes, Slumber Games with an S, all one word. So yeah, if I'm always very open. I love to chat with people. I love to hear what other people think, what other people like, see their perspectives. I keep my Twitch page very conversational, so I hope people will drop by and just say hello. And if you don't like stuff that I do, then I want to hear that as well. I want to hear how I can improve as well. I think that's important. There is always room for improvement. So please drop by.
And Astral Traveler is available to buy from the 13th of September, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So it will be available on Steam starting on September 13th for the price of $5. So it is a pretty affordable game as well. You can check out all of the details at astraltravelergame.com. One L on Traveler. So astraltravelergame.com. Join and help out.
So this wraps up this episode. We'd love to thank Kevin for joining us in this chat.
I want to thank you guys for having me. It was super fun.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Head over to our home base, thatmomentin.com, to read our game reviews. To get gaming news and releases every single day, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook at GameWarp Podcast. See all our gaming obsessions on our Instagram with the handle GameWarp Podcast. Also hang out with us over at Twitch, also GameWarp Podcast, to watch our streams. Till next time, bye!
Cool. Yep.